in about 1 minute.
First thing, my brother, how you doing? I'm doing like
Assalamu alaikum. We'll go ahead and proceed with today's ta'aleem. A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. That is, we seek refuge with Allah from the rejected Satan, as we've been ordered to do. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. With Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Once again, dear brothers and sisters, for those that are present and those on the conference line, I greet you in the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. If you're on the phone call, if you could, mute your phones until you have a question or should you have some feedback. But other than that, if you could, mute your phone for the sake of being able to not disturb the listeners that's on the call and those that may be present. So our subject for today, dear brothers and sisters, is on the value of motherhood in Al-Islam. The value of motherhood in Al-Islam. As we know, today is Mother's Day, so many individuals are celebrating mothers, not only in the U.S. but also across the globe. And it took me a minute because I wanted to be careful with the language that I use, because we do want to bring some balance to this thing, of course, called Mother's Day. So in Al-Islam, of course, Mother's Day is every day. So just like Father's Day is every day. And a lot of the things that Al-Islam brought over 1,400 years ago, the modern world is still behind on, still catching up. So when we look at, just to talk about the history of Mother's Day song before we dive into some Quran and Sunnah regarding the importance of valuing one's mother. And it's important to note when it comes to mother, the ideal of mother in Al-Islam, I sent a text out earlier today with some commentary from Imam Muhammad. A mother is not limited to one that just gives birth. So that's not the only meaning of mother. And when we look at our first mother, what was our first mother name? Eve. Okay. All right. So in Eve, that's important too, as far as that English translation of the name, because I want to touch on both of those. Who remembers the Arabic name for Eve? Good. Hawa. So if we look at those two names within itself, Hawa, this name also represents life, and this is important and significant, showing us that from Eve, of course, we know through the grace of Allah came life itself, right? And when we look at Eve, the name Eve represents what? When we hear Eve, what do we typically think of. The word Eve. That's Eden, garden. But Eve. What does this word Eve mean? All right. For Timmy, you looking like you know. Unless I'm just calling you out. Okay. So this word Eve is basically what comes before. Right? Just like when you hear, I hate to use this language, but a lot of us can probably relate to it. Prior to Christmas, they say Christmas Eve, the day before. So Eve, when we look at the language of Eve, and the ideal of Eve mentioned, as Brother Farouk mentioned, Hawa, representing life. Our brother Ashah had mentioned her name, Eve. Eve really represents the dawning of the birth of humanity, meaning that from Adam and from Eve came life. As Allah states in the Quran, from Eve He created the human being, and then He created from these two human beings. From there, spreaded human life throughout the earth. So we thank Allah, highly glorified is He, for our mothers. And our mothers is something that we should never take for granted. So Allah states in the Quran, He states in the English translation, I'll be sharing some verses. This is in chapter 46, verse 15. He states, we have enjoined on the human being kindness to his parents. In pain did his mother bear him, and in pain did she give him birth. So just reading this particular ayah, it hit me like it never hit me before, just in that moment reading the English translation. Allah mentions the two pains. I'm sure the sisters that we have here present, and the sisters that we have on the line, and the brothers that may have been in the room when this happened can witness to this, and who have witnessed this experience. Allah states, first, be kind to your parents. And then He mentioned in pain did the mother bear him, meaning for the 9 months, right? She bore it with pain. And then even when it came to the birth of the child, it was, painful. It was a painful experience. So Allah reminds us of the pain that the mother goes through when it comes to carrying the life of the human being inside of her. And Allah goes on to state, this is in chapter 17, verse 23 through 24. Allah states, your Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him, and that you be kind to your parents, whether one or both of them attain old age in your life. Say not to them a word of contempt, nor repel them, but address them in terms of honor. And out of kindness lower to them the wing of humility, and say, my Lord, bestow on them thy mercy, even as they cherish me in childhood. So we see in this particular verse, and there's another verse that follows, where Allah, in the verse where He says worship Him, He also says to show high regard for one's parents. And this is something that when Allah puts something in the particular ayat together, we shouldn't see that as just something that's haphazardly. Allah highly glorified is He strategically put the Quran, as far as His words, in a specific placement in order to appeal to the human intellect, not only the intellect of the mind, but the intellect of the heart. So Allah states, even when they reach old age, don't say to them a word of contempt or repel them, but address them in terms of honor. Now, when we look at this ideal of motherhood, going back to Mother's Day, who knows how long Mother's Day been around? Because it just came up 40 years ago. We don't know what we're saying. So as Muslims, we want to be informed. So who knows when well, I won't put us on the spot like that. I tell her. So Mother's Day came around. I had to look it up myself this morning. I looked it up before, but it's not something I necessarily keep up with like that. But Mother's Day was incorporated in the early 1900s. All right, it was started by a woman if I recall correctly, in the Pennsylvania area. And when we look at the history of women in America have a history of being degraded, not appreciated, right, being overlooked. So this particular person and others amongst her, they started a movement to appreciate mothers. And it wasn't until after her death that Mother's Day was something that became more so nationally recognized, as it's recognized in other countries. Now, I have to say this because as Muslims, especially Muslim Americans, we want to be mindful of where we get our information from. Because if you go online, you're going to see different things when it comes to Mother's Day. You're going to see some stuff that say Mother's Day is haram. And then a Muslim shouldn't be talking about no happy Mother's Day. That's haram. It wasn't around during the time of the Prophet, so we shouldn't do it either. Right? Now, a person shouldn't go as far as to say it's haram. Now, if a Muslim say, I don't want to do Mother's Day, they okay. So we can't be on the same, we can't be like, nah, brother, you can't do that, brother. You should be around saying Happy Mother's Day. If a brother or sister don't want to engage in it, that's okay. Because what's the two holidays for a Muslim? Eid al-Fitr, which we commemorated after the month of Ramadan, and then Eid al-Adha, which we commemorate upon the pilgrims completing the Hajj. So as Muslims, when we look at what we would call national non-religious holidays, because this language holiday means holy day, but it's considered a non-religious day of commemoration. And Muslims who come from other countries who may say these particular things in their own countries, they have days that they celebrate other than Eid. But they'll tell you and I, that's haram. Don't do that. For example, Saudi Arabia. Well, we know it wasn't always Saudi Arabia. It was just Arabia. And then after they, King Saud, as he's referred to, took place, it became Saudi. And anytime you hear E, like, for example, to say mother in Arabic is To say father is Abu. Now, if I want to say my mother, I say Ummi. I add the E at the end. So Saudi, they're saying that this is Arabia. But that belongs to Allah. So when we look at this concept of non-religious days of appreciation, if we use that language, in Saudi Arabia, they have days that they celebrate the founding of him taking ownership of kingship of that country. But they'll tell you and I, don't celebrate your mama. So I had to shed that light in order for us to have balance as Muslim Americans. So when we look at another verse in the Quran, Allah states, we have enjoined on man and woman kindness to his parents. But if either of them strive to force you to join with me anything of which you have no knowledge, obey them not. In reference into that. That's important to know too. It ain't saying don't listen to your parents altogether. If they say they ain't Muslim, you don't have anything to do with them. And we have to be careful of that because it's a mindset out there that promotes that as well. So Allah stays still, deal with them in kindness. But don't follow them in areas of worship. So, as Muslims, as believers, we have a duty to appreciate our mothers. And I mentioned Mother's Day is every day in Al-Islam. So it's asked regarding Muhammad the Prophet, prayers and peace and blessings be upon him. Many of us are familiar with this, so this may be a reminder. A man came to the Prophet and said, O messenger of God, who among the people are most worthy of my good companionship? The Prophet, prayers and peace and blessings be upon him, he stated, give me an answer. Your mother. And then the companion asked again. He said, what about after that? Who next? Your mother. Okay. Then he said, okay, what about after that? Your mother. One more time. Then after that, what did he say? Your father. Now, when we look at this places great emphasis on the importance of valuing the mother. Right? Meaning that it doesn't mean now for the father, now you just get thrown on the back burner, you're not important. So I know they too young to understand, but if we have anybody that's listening, a child that's other age to understand, that doesn't mean that the father get placed on the back burner, but it does emphasize the high regard for one's mother. So much so that even in another narration, the prophet stated that heaven lies where? At the foot of your mother. Somebody been studying. You must knew what we were going to be talking about today. Imam Abdul Rahim, I need to just pull you up here. You ready? He shake his head no. So the mother is of a high value, and we don't limit the mother to one day. And even in instances where our mothers may no longer be living with us, we can still honor our mothers by praying for them. That's one of the best things that we can do. Praying for our mothers. We can pray for our mothers. And it's differences on this too. I didn't mean for this to be a day of differences. But when it comes to our Christian families, for example, many of us come from Christian tradition. Many of our mothers may have been Christian. And they may not be with us now physically, but our Christian mothers, our Christian parents are not restricted from heaven. Now I have to say that because you have some people that come from overseas tell you if you ain't a Muslim, you're going to hell. But we don't follow that particular ideology. Because how can I truly love someone if in the back of my mind I'm thinking that they're going to hell because they don't accept what I believe. So as believers, once again, emphasizing the importance specifically on mothers, in another narration, the prophet, prayers and peace and blessings be upon him, stated, actually, this on authority of Asma bint Abu Bakr, the daughter of Abu Bakr, that during the treaty of Hudaybiyah, her mother, who was then a pagan. Now look at this. She wasn't even a Christian. She wasn't even a people of the book. She was a pagan. She worshipped other things with God. Said during the treaty of Hudaybiyah, her mother, who was a pagan, came to see her from Mecca. Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with them both, informed the messenger of Allah of her arrival and also that she needed help. She wanted to get some guidance from Muhammad the Prophet. My mother came into town. She a pagan. What should I do? And the Prophet said, you should be good to your mother. You should take care and fulfill that responsibility that the mother has over you. So the mother, and as much that can be said regarding the importance of respecting one's mother in Al-Islam, but the mother holds great weight in Al-Islam, and our mothers are something that we should never take for granted. We should never take for granted. And the mother gives birth to the mind of the child, right? If we look at the history, not only of in America, but throughout the world, quite often the greatest minds are produced through the mother transferring information. In fact, it's a saying that the mother is the first educator of the child. All right? And as I mentioned, this ideal of mother is not constricted to one that just gives birth, because we know that there's many women that, for whatever reason, Allah knows best, they're not able to even conceive a child. But this shouldn't constrict them from the idea of utilizing their motherly attributes that Allah highly glorified as He has put in them to be a caretaker for those that may come within their midst. So I know I use this word in reference to the Arabic language or the Quranic ideal of mother. And if we look at the earth, what is the earth quite often called? Mother Earth. Okay. So, and this concept of Mother Earth, what do we think this means when we look at the ideal of Mother Earth that is called? We know that Allah is the creator of all, and even the earth has a law that Allah has placed it upon. But why do we think that the earth has been given this, if we call it a nickname of Mother Earth? What are some signs that we see? Resources. All right. I heard you say birth. What does the earth give birth to? What does the earth give birth to? That's open for anybody. Man, say birth. What does the earth give birth to? Plants. All right. So plants, trees. We know that as human beings, Allah states that He created us from the earth. And we know that one day we're going to return to the earth. Not only does the earth give birth, a life to these things, the earth, similar to a mother, it what? By the will and mercy of Allah, because it's on Allah, it sustains. All right? It sustains. And a lot of individuals, not only do they abuse the earth, but they also physically, surprisingly, verbally, emotionally, even abuse their mothers. This may sound foreign to us, but there's a lot of people that abuse and mistreat their parents. specifically referencing the mother, since we're talking about the mother today. So Allah didn't just reveal this for any reason. It had to be a problem, not only in that time, but historically, for Allah to remind the human being to show reverence to the ones that took care of them when they couldn't take care of their own selves. So the mother. So before we conclude, I want to leave the door open for some questions or some feedback, and we'll start with those that's present here at the masjid before we open the door to those that may be on the call. Keeping in mind, we talked about the value of the mother in Al-Islam. All right, nobody in person. Do we have anybody on the call that has any questions or feedback regarding the value of motherhood in Al-Islam? Okay. All right.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum.
I have a question. This is Sister Linda.
Okay.
Is it okay, like, you know, I lost my mother a year ago.
Okay.
And of course I'm still grieving.
All right.
And is there, a time frame when you're grieving for your mother? I know the prophet grieved for his mom when they was passed in her grave.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering, like, is nothing wrong with that if you go to the grave and visit it and put flowers on it? Is that okay to do as being a Muslim?
Okay. That's an excellent question, Sister Linda, and I definitely appreciate your willingness of what I would call to be vulnerable and ask that question. So it's good to know that we're in a good safe space where we can be vulnerable and share and ask certain questions. So Sister Linda's question, she shared with her mother transitioning, her mother passing, regarding a timeline for grief, and she also asked regarding if it was okay to visit the grave and place flowers on the grave. So I'll answer your second question first. Regarding visiting the grave, there's nothing wrong with visiting the grave of your deceased parent and placing flowers on that grave. And should there be a need, cleaning that grave. Because sometimes, unfortunately, graves can be neglected depending on where the parent may be. In fact, from a mental health standpoint, when it comes to those that may have lost their parents, some may have a need to do this. Some may have a need not to do this. And this brings me to the grief timeline that you mentioned. It's a saying that grief is as unique as a person's fingerprint, meaning that no two fingerprints are going to be alike. I don't care if a person has a twin brother or twin sister, their fingerprint going to be different. If they have a triplet, quadruplet, whatever the case may be, everybody's going to grieve differently. Meaning that, once again, you can have a group of 5 siblings and they can lose a parent, but all 5 of them are going to experience grief in a different way. And those ways should be respected, but there's no timeline to grief. Scientifically speaking, some say it can take 2 to 7 years. Some people can grieve quicker than that, but it's not a timeline. There is something that's called the stages of grief. And maybe before this month is over with, I don't know if we have 5 Sundays this month, 4, I can't recall. But maybe one day we can do something in relation to grief. But grief has different stages, with the first one for some people being denial. And I would say this doesn't go against the concept of Al-Islam, because when we look at the death of Muhammad the Prophet, prayers and peace and blessings be upon him, when this was first heard, there was some of the early Muslims, they couldn't believe it. So denial is a common first stage of grief. A next stage is considered bargaining. Now, as Muslims, we may not go into this. Some may go into it. Bargaining is the idea of just wishing that something would change. Now, Muslims may not experience that. Allah knows best, because if we do, we should go back to the idea that Allah is in control of everything. The next one, some people feel, is called anger. They may experience anger in their grief, meaning that they may be angry at the person, they may be angry at themselves because of however the transition may have happened. But we have to always balance that out to go back to Allah. Doesn't allow a leaf to fall by His permission. So the Quran can help keep us grounded, but it doesn't mean that we don't experience emotions as human. The next stage is considered depression, meaning that a person feels sadness. And even though I'm mentioning these stages, everybody don't experience these stages in a linear way, like stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some people can experience more than one stage at one time. Some people may go back and forth between the stage, but the next stage is experiencing sadness. And then the last stage is considered acceptance, meaning that we accept the reality of the person transitioning. And through that acceptance, when we think about them, we may have some moments of feeling sad, but we can also have those moments where we can still experience happiness when we think about that loss. So visiting the grave is something that's not discouraged. In fact, I would encourage it. So if a person wants to visit the grave on the weekend of Mother's Day or any other time, that's considered acceptable. And for those that may be experiencing grief, I would advise when it comes to certain days of the year, whether it be Mother's Day, the birthday of a loved one, to have some type of plan prior to that particular day on what can I do to just help with managing my grief on that day, whether that's cooking the favorite meal that they may have liked or eating a certain dessert that they may have liked, just to name a few of those examples. So I hope I didn't go on too long regarding that, but I did want to answer that question.
Alhamdulillah.
Any other questions on the call? Right. So, and as I mentioned, hey, making prayer, making dua for our parents that have transitioned as well. Right. So we thank those that joined us on the call. We thank those that joined us in person. Once again, we talked about the value of motherhood. Let us hold our mothers in high value. Let us give them the respect and the dignity that's deserving of them. Let us be thankful for this way of life, Al-Islam, which came to, if we use this language, resurrect that over 1,400 years ago in a society where they're still trying to figure it out. So we thank Allah for our mothers. We thank Allah for our mother figures as well. And if you're on that text thread or on the WhatsApp thread, I sent out a text. And matter of fact, I'll read it for those that may have didn't get a chance to look at it or may have not received it. So I'm gonna read this saying on Motherhood by Imam Muhammad Rahimahullah. And this was back in September 1977. He states, "A woman's identity is in her basic nature, motherhood. A woman's unique nature creates her motherhood. She does not have to birth a child to come into motherhood. Mother, as a social role, is a leadership role for which physical motherhood is a symbol. Motherhood does not mean ability or capacity of only giving birth. It also means, in addition, having the responsibility and authority of a mother to look after and care for life as the mother does. Therefore, all women are by their nature and qualities mothers. Little girls are mother-like." I know I can testify to that. I was sitting on the couch yesterday, and my daughter, I think I may have said I was tired or something like that. She said, "You need to lay down, Daddy." She said, I laid down, I followed instructions. Then she brought me a blanket. She said, "You need this blanket on you." And she laid that blanket on me. Before you knew it, I was in a good nap. I felt good. I woke up thinking it. So I attest to that. It says the reproductive function in a woman naturally gives her distinct physical and social desires and a strong motherly interest in life and society. Women need to take a look at the role of motherhood in the world, and they need to reassess, reevaluate, and reestablish the importance of the role of motherhood in the world. Motherhood is the most valuable attribute to a society. Woman does not have to have a baby or even be fertile to be a mother. And I'm going to skip down some for the sake of time. It says, "We must have motherhood in the home and in the nation. We need those sentiments serving the best interests of the nation, which are by nature female generated. We need the keen eye of motherhood watching over the land. Intelligent men know world leadership is best when it's combined with the wisdom which originates from fatherhood and with the wisdom which originates from motherhood. Female interest coming from the lungs of motherhood reaches us as solutions to problems and not merely as attacks upon conditions. So we need women, men need women, and women need men in order for us to have a true community life. And I close with this. When we look at mother, once again, I mentioned the word representing mother. And we know that when it comes to community, what's the Quranic word for community? Ummah. So, ummat. So, ummat. This word originates from the word mother, meaning that a community should be motherly like, meaning that you should be taking care of each other. As the prophet said, if another Muslim is hurt, another Muslim is hurt, we should feel that as if it was another extension from our body. And even this word imam comes from that same sentiment, some say, from a linguistic standpoint, meaning that a person that's in a leadership position, keeping in mind, imam is not just limited to this little space, this big space here. I won't say little space, but you're an imam in your own home, right? So those that have the leadership roles in the home should be similar to the mother. They should be gentle. They should be kind. They should be. We should be understanding. So we thank Allah how to glorify the for this way. We'll close out in dua. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Lord, give us the excellence in this life. Give us the excellence in the life to come, and save us from the punishment of the fire. Ameen. May Allah bless you with a beautiful rest of your Sundays. Value your mothers. Assalamu alaikum.
Shalom.